Well, hello again, and welcome to Woman's World. I'm your host, Sue Samlaska. Today I have the privilege of talking to dermatologist Dr. Kurt Samlaska. And we're going to talk a little bit about skin cancer. I think that's a concern for a lot of us, and especially those of us who are in our senior years. Welcome, Doctor.
Good to see you, Sue.
I know there's several different kinds of skin cancer.
Right.
What are they, and how are they different from each other?
Well, there's three major types. The most common type of skin cancer is what's referred to as a basal cell carcinoma, and this particular tumor is derived from the basal layer of the lining of the skin, the epidermal portion of the skin. These tend to be fairly localized tumors. They don't metastasize. So I tell patients there's two lists: cancers to get, cancers not to get. If you had to get one, get this, because as long as you cut it out, make sure that it's gone, there's a very low probability of any type of metastasis. The second category is squamous cell carcinomas, and squamous cell carcinomas are derived from the epidermal portion of the skin. They tend to be more on the extremities, arms, hands, than on the central facial areas, but you can get them on the face too.
What causes that?
Sun damage. It's basically all related to sun, and of course your skin type, the fairer you are, the number of burns that you have, all kind of comes in cumulative. People forget that tanning is directly a response to ultraviolet radiation exposure. So they forget that it's radiation. It's no different than nuclear radiation or X-rays. If you look at it in that context, you realize that throughout your lifetime, you're collecting all this radiation damage, and your skin is what is predominantly taking that hit. So through the years, your skin starts to mutate, and these mutations progress to either basal cells, squamous cells, and of course the worst one of the worst ones is melanoma. And melanoma are the pigmented ones. They're derived from the melanocytic cells, which are the cells that provide pigment to your skin.
And how's that happen?
Sun damage again. It's all sun.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a lot of times it's related to an existing mole or nevus that's been damaged and then mutates and forms the melanoma. And they can be very aggressive and they can be very lethal. The single most important thing about melanoma detection is getting them early. You want to get them as early as you can when they're very thin and they haven't invaded into the dermal tissue.
And those are the ones that in
They're
color,
black.
They're dark.
They're usually black or blue. It's the A, B, C, D's, asymmetry, border, color, and diameter. The size of a pencil eraser or larger is of concern if it's irregular. If it has blurred margins as opposed to sharp margins. Those are the main features. Then color, black to blue or changing, or if it starts to go away. All those are signs that you're going to want to have a dermatologist take a look at it.
And how do you treat these?
Well, most of these are treated with surgery. Basal cell carcinomas are easily excised, so are squamous cells, and so are melanoma. The difference between them is margins. Now, melanomas, depending upon how thick they are, we take wider margins. We usually do 1 centimeter margins if it's 1 to 2 millimeters in penetration. And this is all determined by the biopsy, and the pathologist will actually measure the level of penetration.
Can that one metastasize?
Yes, melanomas are the one that metastasize and can be very lethal.
Okay. Well, what can we do to prevent skin cancer?
Well, the major thing is sun avoidance throughout your lifetime. There's just really nothing good about sun exposure other than the vitamin D. Now, vitamin D you can get other ways. You can take vitamin D supplementation. There's vitamin D patches that you can take where it'll absorb across the skin. So you don't have to get your vitamin D necessarily through sun exposure. Sunscreens are very important. Avoiding the peak hours, between 11 and 4. Trying to do
are out there
exactly. Sunning is not a good thing. And so there's things that you can do if you like to be in the pool. If there's a period of the time during the day that it's shaded, that's when you should swim, or very early or very late. Now, sunscreens are very helpful. And what people don't realize is that if you are tanning when you're using a sunscreen, then you're doing something wrong. Because the sunscreen is essentially designed to block you from tanning. It's going to absorb the ultraviolet so it doesn't get to the deeper structures, so it doesn't induce melanocyte to do their thing, which is to darken your skin. Darkening or tanning is essentially a protective mechanism. It's a way that your skin's trying to protect itself from the ultraviolet. It's trying to absorb it in the higher layers. So
use one with zinc. Is that a good one?
zinc is good. There's different types. There's some that absorb the energy, like paraminobenzoic acid. Zinc and titanium reflect. They reflect out.
Oh, okay.
Now, the one thing that you need to be aware of is, what does SPF mean? A sun protection factor of 15 essentially means that if you could go outside and you could get sun without any sunscreen, and it took an hour, for example, before you would get pink, that's called our minimal erythema dose, the minimum dose of sun that you get before you turn pink. So if you have that's a 1 MED. So if you have a 1 MED that you could be out for an hour and you put a sunscreen of 15 on, that means you could be out for 15 hours before you reach that same point.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So, so it's important to make sure that you put the sunscreens on. And one of the things that people don't do is they don't put it on thick enough. So if you thin out a 15, and they've done these studies, then it becomes a 2 or a 3.
Oh, okay.
And then it washes off, or you sweat it off. So if you're going to be out for longer than 2 hours, the other instruction is to reapply every 2 hours. Okay. In the studies, a single bottle of sunscreen is 3 applications.
Wow.
Well, who does that?
No.
Nobody does that.
You'd be covered.
Right. The other thing is that we used to tell patients that anything over a 15 was a waste. Back when I was a resident, we used to say that. Because if you look at the absorption curve, it kind of plateaus out. And to go from a 15 to a 30, the amount of protection you get is pretty small. But the Europeans did some really nice studies where they took these higher SPF sunscreens and they had people use them, and they measured their exposure. And they found that, yes, indeed, the higher SPFs did work better, because guess what? You take a 70 or a 50 and you put it on thinner, now it's a 20 or a 30.
Oh, I see.
So all this stuff kind of comes into play. So the higher SPFs actually are better. They are more protective.
Good.
And so I encourage my patients to all use higher SPFs.
Okay, that's good advice.
Yeah.
Alopecia.
Alopecia. There's lots of different types of alopecia. There's androgenic alopecia. That's what most of us men deal with as we get older. It's related to testosterone. These hair follicles are essentially programmed to die out.
I know women that have it.
Women have it also. It's a polygenetic trait. That's why you can have one brother that has a full head of hair and another brother that has no hair, because it's multiple genes. And women get the genes too. It's just that they manifest it differently. Men get temporal recession, they get occipital thinning, and then it kind of all comes together so that it becomes bald on the top. Women maintain the frontal hairline, and they just thin on the top.
Right.
So they just thin on the top, and it just gets slowly progressive.
Is there anything you can do for that?
Sure. There are some things that you can do. There's 2 things that have been shown to help hair grow. One is Rogaine. That's over the counter. You do not need a prescription for it.
Seen that advertised.
The other one is Propecia. The Propecia is the one is finasteride. That's for men. It's not recommended for women. As far as the Rogaine goes, they've done studies now that have shown that if women use the male's version of Rogaine once a day, that's equivalent to the female version twice a day.
Oh.
So I recommend to patients to use it, to get the men's version. You get twice as much out of it, and it's easier to do it. It's a different concentration. Yeah.
Doctor, where are you located?
I am located at 2839 St. Rose Parkway, right by, down by the Eastern and St. Rose Parkway. I'm behind the Smart and Final there.
Right. And if anybody wants more information,
you can go to my website. It's acadderm.com, acadderm.com. That's my website. I also have a blog there if anybody's interested in. I've got lots of photographs that I put up there. I review various disease states, and so it's kind of fun.
Very interesting. And the phone number?
Phone number is 702-837-8988.
Good. Well, this has been great. Very informative. Hopefully you'll come back again and we'll discuss other types of skin maladies.
Okay, very good. Thanks, Sue.
I'm Sue Samlaska for Woman's World.